All right, let's talk about a guy who scammed America, got fabulously rich doing it, and then got rich all over again by telling everyone exactly how he did it. This is the anatomy of the Wolf of Wall Street scam.
I want to start with just one number. Seriously, this one number tells you almost everything you need to know about this story. 22 months.
Yep, that's the total time a man who orchestrated a fraud that stole over $100 million from regular, everyday people actually spent in jail. It's kind of insane when you think about it, right? So how on earth did this happen? How did this guy, Jordan Belfort, build a whole empire on nothing but lies? And maybe the even bigger question is, why do so many people today still seem to cheer for him?
To really get this, we've got to go back, way back. Before Wall Street, before he was the Wolf, he was just a kid from Queens with one single, relentless ambition: get rich. And he really didn't care how.
You know, he came from a pretty regular working-class background, but this guy had zero interest in modest dreams. I mean, at just 16 years old, he was already showing his hustle, making 20 grand in a single summer just selling Italian ices. He even gave the traditional route a shot, enrolling in dental school. But get this, on the very first day, the dean tells the class something like, "If you're here just to get rich, you're in the wrong profession." Belfort supposedly stood up right then and there and just walked out. Done. His next venture was a door-to-door meat and seafood business, which, yeah, that was a complete disaster. It went bankrupt super fast.
But here's the thing. In that failure, he found his superpower. He had this massive realization. The product itself didn't matter. As he put it, steaks, surfboards, stocks, you can sell anything. And that was the key. It wasn't about the value you provided. It was about the pure, unadulterated art of persuasion. And that cynical little insight, well, that was about to make him millions upon millions of dollars.
Okay, so with this new philosophy, Belfort needed a new arena, a place to put this theory to the test. So he just built one from scratch. And that brings us to the story of Stratton Oakmont, his infamous boiler room empire.
Now forget what you think a Wall Street firm looks like. This was not some stuffy office with Ivy League MBAs. Stratton Oakmont started in a strip mall, and Belfort hired bartenders, college dropouts, anyone with hustle. He didn't want experience. He wanted raw hunger and absolute loyalty. And their targets? They weren't the super rich. They went after working class people, folks that the big Wall Street firms completely ignored. See, they weren't just selling stocks. They were selling the dream, a potent cocktail of hope, urgency, and completely false certainty to people who really wanted to believe.
So how did he turn these absolute rookies into sales machines? He invented a system, the Line Persuasion system. It was basically a psychological pressure cooker, a script designed to just bulldoze any hesitation and march a potential customer from a simple hello all the way to "where do I send the check?" in one single high-pressure conversation. It was powerful, and it was deeply predatory.
So they had the sales force, and they had the system. But how did the scam itself actually work? This is the engine of the entire fraud, the classic pump and dump.
The key to the whole operation was the specific thing they were selling: penny stocks. Now, these are the wild west of the stock market. They're super high-risk, barely regulated stocks from tiny, often completely worthless companies. Most serious brokers wouldn't touch them with a 10-foot pole. But for Belfort, they were perfect. Why? Because of one magic number: 50%. That was the commission. He could make 10 times more money selling this garbage than he could selling a legitimate blue-chip stock. And the process was brutally simple and repeatable. First, acquire. Stratton would secretly buy up huge blocks of some cheap penny stock. Second, pump. The sales floor would erupt, making thousands of cold calls, creating a frenzy of hype with total lies about some groundbreaking tech or an imminent buyout. Third, inflate. All that manufactured excitement would actually work, driving the stock price sky high. Fourth, dump. Right at the peak, Belfort and his inner circle would sell off all of their shares, flooding the market. And that leads to the final step: crash. The stock becomes totally worthless, leaving thousands of investors holding the bag. For the guys at Stratton, it was just another Tuesday.
So what did all this fraud buy? Well, it bought an empire of excess that became the stuff of legend. The spoils were just as outrageous as the crime itself.
Let's just talk numbers for a second. $2,000. That was the price of a typical Armani suit, basically the mandatory uniform for his cult of greed. $50,000. That was a pretty average cash withdrawal for him, which tells you a lot about the money laundering operation running just beneath the surface.
And over $2 million. That was the cost of the yacht he named after his wife, a giant floating symbol of his wealth and ultimately his own ego.
The office culture was just as depraved. We're talking about strippers in the conference rooms, champagne being poured into fax machines just for fun. They were literally snorting lines of cocaine off the company's own compliance manuals. The irony! It was a circus of drugs, fistfights, and constant, insane pressure. Top performers were treated like gods, while underperformers were publicly humiliated and replaced in hours. And this chaos wasn't an accident. It was a management tool to foster loyalty and fear.
But, an empire built on lies and fueled by chaos like that can't last forever. The party was almost over, and the whole structure was beginning to rot from the inside out.
And Belfort's delusion was just constantly crashing against reality. What he called asset protection, the FBI called money laundering, as he smuggled cash to Swiss bank accounts. When he insisted on sailing his yacht through what he called a minor storm, it sank in a full-blown gale. And those loyal brokers he trusted so completely? Yeah, they were quickly becoming informants for the FBI.
The final nail in the coffin came in October of 1996. Federal agents raided Stratton Oakmont. Phones were ripped from desks, hard drives were seized. The scheme, the party, the empire, it was all completely over.
But hold on, because this is where the story takes its most unbelievable turn. For Jordan Belfort, getting caught wasn't the end. No, it was just the beginning of his second act, transforming himself from a convicted con man into a global pop culture icon.
So Belfort was facing up to 30 years in federal prison. But he did what he always does. He made a sale. Only this time, the product was his own friends and colleagues. He flipped on everyone, cooperating with the FBI and handing over more than 30 employees. The result? His sentence was slashed to just 22 months in a minimum security facility.
So he gets out in 2005, and the rebrand begins immediately. By 2007, he publishes his memoir, The Wolf of Wall Street, which reads way more like a victory lap than a confession. Then, in 2013, Martin Scorsese and Leonardo DiCaprio turn his crimes into a blockbuster film. And today, he's a motivational speaker, teaching sales and, get this, ethics to corporations around the world. He didn't just get away with it, he monetized it.
But what about the victims? In the middle of this whole glamorous second act, there's a really grim reality. The court ordered Belfort to pay $110 million in restitution. To this day, only a tiny fraction has ever been paid. The vast majority of that money, it just vanished, leaving thousands of people with nothing but debt and broken trust.
Which leaves us with a final unsettling question. Why do we celebrate a story like this? The film, the book, the legend, they all focus on the party, not the hangover. It's easy to condemn the fraud, but maybe the story's enduring appeal reveals something uncomfortable. That deep down, maybe a part of us doesn't just want to punish the wolf. Maybe we want to be the wolf. And if that's true, what does that say about us?